Hello, everybody. Hello, Kraken, Psyder, Mylogify, MindB, Gilne Longo, Nihilist37, Larata Bastardo Sound System, Transient Snail, Patrick Chusa, how you doing? Carlos Allo, T-Babble, Aragon, Mylogify. Did I say hello yet? Thanks everyone for tuning in. So today's stream is probably going to be a little bit shorter than usual. So I'm not going to be going through like creating a full track or anything like that, or attempting to create a full track. I just want to create a couple of sort of melodies, focusing more on creating compelling MIDI patterns for acid type leads. So I want to talk through some of the sort of things that some of the ideas that I usually use. Hey, 4i20, how are you doing? So I want to talk about some of the concepts that I usually use when I'm writing these kind of acid leads. And yeah, hopefully if you guys have any questions or anything like that, you can let me know. I'm also just going to quickly go through creating a pretty simple acid-like patch in Phaseplant. So I've got a quick project that I just quickly threw together here. In fact, I probably still need to save it just in case. Yeah, at the moment, we're having really bad power outages. So I've only got a few hours to go to be online before we've got another power outage coming. So figured I would squeeze the stream in anyway, even if it's a little bit shorter. So I just planned a couple of sort of talking points and stuff that we can go through. But otherwise, it's some pretty simple stuff here. Just the kind of sound effects noise loop, some one-hits from a Phaseplant pack that I'm working on, which I don't want to give away too much about, so we're not going to go into those. But yeah, just a simple kind of kick bass loop, some percussion stuff, which I think these are from the Static Movement pack on another studio tour in the future. You know it, bro. So as you probably noticed that we're getting very, very close to that 50k mark. I actually can't believe it. I actually cannot believe it. So as tradition, well, I guess like my 20k milestone, I did a studio tour as well. So I figured, it'd be a great opportunity to do a studio tour, as when we hit 50k. So it'll be a little bit after, it won't be as we hit 50k because I'm still kind of working on it and stuff. But as you can see, there's been some changes around here and stuff. Things look a bit better, and I want to show you guys. So I've also downsized a few things. So I guess there's less synths and gear in here. And I'm kind of just more focused on the stuff that I actually use all the time. Do you know what I mean? So a smaller MIDI controller, smaller, less gear, and kind of more focused. But yeah, I focus a lot on the aesthetics when I was kind of fixing things up a little bit. I painted the walls, put in colorful LEDs and stuff because I wanted to make it feel like, when you sat down here, it like felt like, okay, now I'm in a professional space, And I think that's conducive to being creative, sitting in a good space. But anyway, hey Klaus, how you doing? Hey Nihilist37. Oh yes, of course, I said hello to you already. I'm busy answering your question. Anyway, so what we can maybe do is quickly just create a patch here. Let me just pop open Phaseplant. And we can go through a couple of the basics. So I think this track is in A plus 10. Is that A sharp? Copy this. Might actually be a bit high. We can play around. So what we can actually do is we can, once we've this is one thing I really like about setting up templates and stuff, or setting up basic projects before diving too much into working on the stuff, because now we can change the tempo, change the key, and find something that grooves a little bit better. So like, for example, all of these synths have the same transpose on it. You also notice here I'm still on Bitwig V4, and everyone's raving about Bitwig V5, and I'm super excited, don't get me wrong. I don't want to update quite yet because I feel like there's going to be quite a few changes, because it's still quite an early beta. there's going to be quite a few changes, and if I talk too much about certain features, those features might change and that kind of thing. But one thing that I'm super excited about is the global modulation. So what that means is, you see all these transpose here. We could potentially have a single macro that can control the tuning of the entire project. So if we wanted to, for example, change the key, let me just mute these. And so we've just got the kick and bass playing and some percussions. And say, for example, we wanted to change the key of the bass, you could set it so that the whole project would change at the same time, which is really, really cool. I actually like A bit better than A sharp. Okay, so the reason that I do that is because now I can just play in C, and it'll transpose whatever I'm playing to the specific key of the track. Especially if you have a smaller MIDI controller that's kind of just like 2 octaves, it's actually, you get better use of that space if you just play in C. So hear me out. Like, say for example, if you started playing, if your root note was in G, and you're playing on a MIDI controller that only has 2 octaves, you only have 1.5 octave worth of range to play with. Whereas if you just play in C and transpose it, you've got 2 octaves worth of range. So it's actually better use of space as well, as just being easier for somebody who's not too familiar with music theory and stuff like that. So what I mean by this is, like, if I play the same melody on my MIDI controller, and set this to in here. You guys can't hear that. But if I play the same melody, like C, D sharp, G, I can just tune whatever notes are actually coming out the speakers with this. So what I do is I kind of memorize just the scales that are in C, and then I just transpose it to whatever it is. So for example, we want to play in A minor. I just set this to +9, and I play in C minor, but it's going to come out in A minor. And so, like, I can play the same thing. I might not get it exactly the same, obviously, because I'm only human. But, like, say, for example, somebody's like, okay, no, now the band is playing in G minor. You can just shift it to +7 and play the same thing, but it's going to be now played in G minor. Do you know what I mean? Okay, I hope that makes sense. So that's what that whole situation is going about. So when you see me writing a melody, this is also cool because I can make a bank of MIDI files that are all just one scale, and then just transpose it to whatever scale I need in that moment. That's why I find it so funny when, you know, like the Unison chord pack and all these, like, you get these MIDI packs. But it's just, they write it in 1 and then just times it by 12. And I was like, oh, 5,000 MIDIs. But just divide that by 12, and that's how much they've actually made. Anyway, enough of that. So the basic acid sound is generally a saw or a square wave. So we can set up a way to modulate between either the square or the saw by creating both and then turning the level down on one. And then what we could do is we could set up a macro that's going to turn this down by 100% and turn this up by 100%. And so now we've got the ability to sweep between saw and square wave. So traditionally, actually, with the acid sound, you don't sweep. It's just a switch. Click saw, click square. And to be able to sweep it too much so that it's a saw-ish square or whatever the case is, it starts to sound too modern. Too much not like an acid sound. So what we can do to remedy this situation is to remove this modulation and create a remap. And so what the remap is going to do is we're essentially going to create a switch. So we can use only binary values by creating something like this, where any value below 50% is going to automatically just spit out the value of 0. And then every value above 50% is just going to spit out 100%. So this is a little bit advanced. You don't have to know this to get an acid sound, but it's just good to get the really accurate acid sound. So here what we want to do is we want to set these remaps to, one is going to plus 100% on the square, and then one is going to minus 100% on the saw, minus 100%. So essentially it's going to just flick between saw and square as we go over 50%. Do you see that? Okay, so the next big thing is the fact that it's a monophonic synth with glide. So it's also got a legato built in, so we want to switch those two settings like this. And for now, we can just leave the glide at a kind of low value, just so you can hear a little bit of that wah-wah between the notes. Okay, perfect. So the one downside about the filters here is that they don't actually have the most accurate acid filter in the generator section. To get a really good acid filter, you actually want to use the ladder filter, which is one of the snap-in effects. So I believe this is actually free, ladder filter, so you can actually just get it and put it on any synth. But then you don't have the ability to get these like really tricky modulations and stuff like you can get inside Phase Plant. Do you know what I mean? But so essentially you get two different types of ladder filter. You get the transistor ladder filter and the diode ladder filter. So I believe, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the transistor ladder filter is the style of filters that's generally in a Moog synth. So if you want something that's going to sound closer to Serum's default filter, which is the MG12, which is the Moog 12 dB per octave emulation. If you want to get something closer to Serum's default filter, you would use the ladder filter in transistor mode. But if you want something closer to the old Roland style filters, I believe they were diode ladder filters. The reason it's called a ladder, actually, funnily enough, is because if you look at the circuit diagram, it's two, I don't know the exact term, I guess, but it's two lines, and these components are basically laid out like a ladder in that line, if that makes sense. And depending on what component they used, whether it was a diode or a transistor, that would make up the style of filter. Again, correct me if I might be totally off, but I believe that's what I believe of what I've taken away from the situation. You don't actually have to saturate and drive to get a really good acid sound, but most of the time, the distortion or drive characteristic is kind of, you'd kind of always hear it in the acid leads. Do you know what I mean? It was like a thing of, I guess, an aesthetic choice of the time, that the TB303 sound would always just go through a distortion filter. And I guess that's why it's cool that it's built in here. But you can actually get slightly better control if you create your own by, for example, creating an EQ before the distortion. And that way you can kind of choose what harmonics are being boosted more than the others. So you can kind of craft the sound a little bit more accurately. That makes sense. Get some really good distortion tones. But again, that's getting a little bit advanced. The main characteristic is essentially just the fact that for the acid sound, we want a really high resonance, and we want a lot of envelope happening on the cutoff when we actually trigger the sound. So here, let's put in a curve. So it's such a simple and fascinating circuit too, lol. Yeah, that's the thing is, a lot of those old circuits are actually really simple. Yeah, some of the components might not be able to find, so you can't really recreate them or whatever the case is. But it's crazy to look at it and be like, how did they figure out that just these two simple components could synthesize sound as we know it? Do you know what I mean? I swear, some of the most advanced minds were creating those things at that time. And yes, obviously the capabilities of digital synthesis kind of just, how can I say, completely just shits all over that. But it's just crazy to think how they came to these designs, like sometimes so simple, but yet so effective. I guess some of it is determined by the fact that like they had a concept and then they had to reiterate it until it was as simple as possible from a economics point of view, so that they could scale it up and create many, like thousands of these devices. You know what I mean? Anyway, we're getting into the weeds. So the reason I choose a curve as opposed to the traditional envelope is the curve actually allows you to draw in very tight and specific envelopes, which are going to get you closer to the sound, because the older kind of circuits had these kind of slight lags in the speed of like the attack and stuff like that. So you can draw these in by just kind of creating your own specific curves this way and stuff, which is, much more, I guess, accurate than just using an envelope with a bit of attack in the curve. You have a bit more control this way. So let's put quite a short envelope or quite a short time on this curve, and then apply this to the cutoff. Just everything rattles in my studio on that note. I'm sure quite a few of you are hearing that kind of rattly effect that's happening there. So that's due to the resonance. And because the resonance is so high, it kind of like gets to a point where the filter sweeps down and it creates this kind of boost in the low frequencies. And when you hit that same or a very close frequency to what that cutoff sweeps to while the resonance is high, you get that really boxy effect, which it sounds cool at first, like, whoa, okay, everything's vibrating, but it's a little bit too much to actually be used in a track or something like that, because it's just going to create havoc for the rest of the mix. So the way to remedy that is to actually create an envelope or a curve on the resonance, which is actually something that you hear very specifically with the acid sound. However, it's much tighter than the other curve, so we're going to create our own envelope with this. I'm just going to right-click on this node so that it's just a downward curve like this, and we can apply this to the resonance and then turn it down a little bit. So it starts around the same point where it was, so at that peak of the sound, we still get that kind of acidy sound, but then it sweeps downwards so that we get that very low. The resonance is reduced by the time that it gets to the point where it'll be all boxy. Okay, that's already sounding better. So now let's actually just close up some of these modulation lanes like this. Now the trick is to get some accurate velocity modulation. So another big thing about the acid synth or the TB303 is that it only had 2 velocity settings. Nowadays we deal with 127 different velocity settings, and that can often make things sound like it's not an acid lead because it's too modern. You know what I mean? Going back to what I was saying about the remaps, just that switch from saw to square, rather than the sweep, it just sounds more accurate like the original thing. So how we can get the same kind of just 2 velocity settings is with the remaps. Again, doing that same kind of binary setting where we have the velocity sending to the remap, and then on the remap, what we do is we set it so that anything below 50% will be 0, and anything above 50% will be 100%. And so then here, we just apply this to anything we want to be the upper side of the velocity. In other words, on the 303, it's actually called accent. And then that's that. So what we would do traditionally is turn down the amount of attack on the envelopes, or the curves in this case. Sorry, not attack, the amount of modulation amount, and then we would modulate that upwards with the high accent strike. So it's now, you'd only have kind of 2 settings where that kind of, why is it not go? I had to let go, I think. Oh, I'm modulating the wrong thing. It's this. You can actually see there, those like where that dot moves. That's like all the different velocity values, but it's all just spitting out 0 at this point. And then here, it's all just spitting out 100%, even though those values are changing. And so here, what we can do is we can put in I believe it's the mix. And then here, we can modulate this level just a little bit with the same velocity, so that we've also got a volume difference in the accent. Ever so slight, though. We don't want too much there. So you see, when you start to apply the drive that's built in there, it gets a little bit muddy. So what I traditionally do is, I mean, if you don't have Faturator, you can create your own distortion kind of tones by just using the regular distortion and an EQ. And then you just choose what frequencies to kind of boost. You can actually do it, if you don't have the EQs either, you can actually just do it with a series of band peak filters, or just peak filters. and then just choosing the frequency this way. And also looking at the spectrum made me realize that, or made me remember that in the circuit, there's actually a high pass filter at the lowest, and that just curves the kind of response of the saw wave to something that's a little bit less saw wavy, but it still sounds very saw wave. Just doesn't have that very lows, but we can boost that again this way. Okay, so now we can just add some effects for extra oomph. So I'm going to use the delay in ping pong mode. We can actually turn the tone up a little bit so it kind of just teeters off more to the high frequencies. I just realized speakers were off. So I also like to use BitCrush as well. Sometimes just a little bit, just to add extra kind of texture in the high frequencies. And what we can also do is we can create a macro for the glide. And then a macro for the effects. Because then we can kind of just create a bunch of different melodies. We don't have to dive too much into the patch. We can kind of just fine tune it just using the macros and, you know, from directly inside the DAW. Okay, so I could just say like, oh, the key to writing a good acid lead is what I did here is just do it intuitively. But that would make the worst content ever. Sometimes you just feel it. Like, you just feel the groove and you start putting the things in and it works. Do you know what I mean? But the problem is, like, you know, that's not very good information for me to be giving you guys. So, like, let me give you some cool, you know, if sometimes you don't feel it. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you're not feeling the groove and you kind of have to force it a little bit. And so there's a couple of tricks that I like to use to kind of force myself into the groove. So the trick is to kind of think about the range of keys, perhaps in different layers. So first put in what I call the accent notes, which would be the high, most memorable parts of the lead. So often an acid lead will go like da 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 da. You know what I mean? Something like that. It's all those third notes that have the accent. So it's important to concentrate on where those notes are, how they're placed in the rhythm, and how they're placed in the range of notes. I think to focus on that is the most important. And then the rest is just fillers and kind of rhythmic elements and syncopation. So what I mean by this is like, that kind of thing that I just, you know, that thing, let's try recreate it. So let's think about first those third notes. Let's create some kind of compelling melody with just those notes and figure out a good rhythm. So we go da da da. That's already not a good one. Too high. So we go da da da. I'm actually going to just keep everything similar lengths for now. And then we can do all the glides and stuff after we've got the thing in. So we think two notes, da da da, da da da, da da da. And so because I know what notes are in the C minor scale, I can kind of just intuitively put them in by how I've kind of sung the thing in my head. So it went like da, da, da. And so I know it goes a note, and then slightly down, and then slightly up. Does that make sense? And this kind of works. Do you know what I mean? You can't actually hear that. Wait. So then here, what I'll do is I'll kind of just think about like maybe a melody that would be memorable. So it'll go da 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 da, something like that. So you have this kind of change of the groove in the last bit. Da 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 da, something like that. This might even be too much of a change up of the groove, so maybe we can do something like this. This is good. This is good because what's happening here is the accent is kind of shifting to the offbeat, so it creates that obvious syncopation. So this can work. This can work either on its own or as a whole new thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. And now from here, we can continue developing the thing. So if at any point we're like, this is absolute rubbish, we can fall back to the backup, which was the good sounding melody. So at any point you're like, oh, this is a groove, create a backup and a backup clip and then start developing it more. Because you always want a bit of a fallback. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so now here, let's think how we could create these fillers. So the obvious thing is to usually just do alternating octaves, da da, and then just copy this, right, into the blank spaces. I can actually just make this bigger. And then just copy and paste this into the blank spaces. What I like to do though is I like to switch these up. So every second one, it will change. So it'll go up, then down. Down, up, down. Down, up. Does that make sense? And then every now and then, we just make the note a little bit longer. And so because in the patch, we've made it legato and we've given it some glide, that note is going to slide to the next note, much like a TB303 or Acid Sound would do. And so that what can also work now is we've created this acid lead that sounds nice and compelling, but now we have a stepping stone to get there. So we can either use this in two different parts of the track. So like a pre-drop, which plays the simpler version that then leads into the more complex version, or we can split this up into two layers. So we have, for example, like a very high frequency ping or other type of lead that's in a different frequency range, but that's playing the lead that we know works alongside it because it uses the same notes. Does that make sense? So here, I'm just going to create a simple thing for now. Let's just go sine wave with the reverb, and we pitch it up a few octaves. Transpose. Actually, for me, my favorite thing to do is to shift this off so that they're like going off, but at the same time, it's like preempting the sound that you're going to hear. So you either want to shift it left or shift it right, depending like what works best. So you can just and you can also just shift some of them like slightly off, like off and on, so that they fit better with the entire groove. Okay, so now to prove that the theory actually like works most of the time, I'm going to do it again. And we're going to try just create something completely different, but using the same approach. So now, okay, sometimes it's quite hard because you kind of already, you've heard the groove over and over again. So sometimes it kind of paints you to the same thing a few times. Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you, Joey DiCasio. Appreciate that a lot. So kind of changing it up completely can be a little bit difficult. It can help to just take a walk outside for a few minutes and just get some silence and stuff like that. But we're going to try. We're going to try create something different using the same approach. Hey, Heretic, what's good? So what can also help is to slightly change the scale that you're working in. So I know that minor is the scale that you probably heard quite often in EDM music, but Phrygian scale is very close to the minor scale because just one note is shifted. And you can actually shift between the two scales in a single track. I just wouldn't have a section where there's a melody playing with both different ones. Does it make sense? So like have a melody in Phrygian, then have a melody in minor. That's okay. But don't ever play them at the same time. Does that make sense? So here, let's perhaps try one in Phrygian scale because that's very common with acid sounds. what's the approach? So, okay, I'll show you for those who did miss it. The idea is to split the rhythm and the pitch of the different range of notes into different layers. So let's think of first like the accent notes of the melody, and we place those first. We find a good rhythm and notes that work for the accents, and then you can literally just fill in the gaps with almost any other stuff in the scale, mostly just the root note, and it most likely will work. So the idea is to just find a good accent rhythm and pitch for the notes, and then just fill in the gaps. So I'm just going to let it loop, and we can put in some notes. And so we did a more simple rhythm in the previous one. What can also work is to do what's called Euclidean rhythms, which are mathematically spaced gaps. So I don't want to get too deep into it, but I just know a couple off the top of my head, which is like 2 gaps, 1 gap, 2 gaps, 1 gap, or like 3 gaps, 2 gaps, 3 gaps, 2 gaps. So like it's these repetitions of like spacings, which is what a Euclidean rhythm is. So let's try something a bit more complex. Like last time it was just spaces of 2. So let's maybe do spaces of 2, then spaces of space of 2, space of 1, space of 2, space of 1. Does that make sense? And so then let's find notes that work with these. So already we're trying to create a rhythm that's compelling, and then we're going to try to create a melody that's compelling on that rhythm, and then fill in the gaps. Here, what we can do here now is just duplicate this, make it slightly longer, and then here we can drop this note. So now we have like a slightly more evolving melody, but then when we just fill in the gaps, it's going to be so much easier. Yeah, so actually in my head, I kind of pre-thought this a little bit in that I wanted to have a da-da-da-da. So it's going to be like something like this. And then this way would be the other way. So it'll be then going downwards. Oh, it's already sounding good. Okay, so remember what I said. When it's sounding good, duplicate it and then develop it further. So like here, you just fill in the gaps with like alternating root notes, and you're good. Yeah, what I want to do is create a little bit of syncopation by just shifting this to the second off note. So it's like that, so it goes dum, and then the second version of it starts slightly off. have I tried Bitwig 5 yet? Not yet. Personally, I haven't. I'm excuse me. I'm slowly following. I'm very closely following the updates. I'm watching a lot of content on it. I'm definitely going to update, obviously. But I just don't want to do it right now because I can see things are already changing from the first beta. They've already changed a few things. So I obviously don't want to make content on it and then everything changes and then the content has to be deleted and remade. And that's just a whole nightmare. So, and it's also because I want to save myself from commenting the same thing 1,000 times. That'll say like, it's in public beta, just check the Bitwig website. It's in public beta, just check the Bitwig website. You know, these are the kind of things that often happen. You know, whenever I release a video on something that's a kind of a beta thing, it's often a lot more, how can I say? It's often a lot more work after the fact, kind of explaining to everybody that it is a beta and, you know, things can happen and all these kinds of things. So I often try wait to a little bit closer to the release date before I'll do these types of things. You'll notice that I was very late on. I don't think I've actually made an official video on the kind of latest Vital update, the 1.5.1 thing, because I don't believe it's actually officially released yet. I do stream with it and I do use it, and you'll see it in my videos, but I don't mention any of the features from that because things might still change. And you know, the worst thing is to have to go, like, for example, I've got some like big Vital videos, like that kind of one that's like, I think over 2 hours. And for me to have to sit through that, like say, for example, 3 or 4 years later down the line, to pick through multiple hours worth of content to find inaccuracies and stuff like that, it's not the kind of thing that I want to do. I'd rather just focus on the next good video. Does that make sense? And I think you guys would understand that. You probably don't care about the stuff from many moons ago. You want the new stuff because you've seen it already. Anyway, hey Vitalis, how you doing? You just drag the window, but you can also do it here in the options menu by clicking on the actual Vital logo. Yo, I just realized that we haven't even done any velocity stuff. We spent so much time making that velocity like accurate, the velocity tracking accurate, and we haven't done anything with it. So it's time. Oh, there we go. So what I like to do is, so it's the obvious thing would be to just have high velocity on all the accent notes, all the notes that we said are the accents in the melody. But it's actually a more compelling melody if you skip some of them. Some of the accent notes don't have the high velocity because, to be honest with you, the brain is not tuning into all the filler notes. The brain is tuning into the accent notes, and those are the ones that you want to play with the sound more with. Does that make sense? So hear me out. Like, I'm going to show you both examples where we're going to do velocity modulation on everything that's not the accent note and full velocity on all the accent notes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite way around, where these are going to have differing velocities and everything else is just going to be flat. And you're going to see the ones where the accent notes have the differing velocities, not always 100%, is actually going to sound a little bit more compelling. Touch wood, hopefully. Hopefully my theory works out. You see, you don't really notice all that kind of velocity motion that's happening there. But then here, let's set this all back to 100%. And now with the accent notes, every second or so, let's turn this down to the lower one. And now you'll hear it's a lot more, you're going to hear that movement a lot better now. the best is just an overall, everything just slightly randomized. Let's just use the chaos function for that. So much more groovier. I just gotta run to the bathroom real quick. I'll be back in a minute or two. Yeah, so one of the reasons why I tried to design the patch as close to how we would play the 303 type sound is because I wanted folks, like Dan is saying, he just got himself a Freebase FB383 synth rank and doesn't know how to use it well. So I want you folks to be able to apply the melody writing techniques that I'm telling you onto your traditional 383s or whatever replicas or emulations that you have. And I think that's the key to getting a really good acid sound. It's not only the sound itself, is the way the melody sounds in the track. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'll be back in a sec. Here's something important. If you're going to use wider on something that has stereo stuff, you're going to want to use it before any of the stereo stuff. So Game Boy Z says put it mono 1 sec. I don't want the acid lead mono. I like my acid leads very big and very spacious. So I'm going to use wider. And again, if you put this after any stereo effects, it's going to start to sound phasey. But before any stereo effects, what it does is it actually opens up the stereo field because it widens a mono signal and then applies the spatial effects after it's already been widened. So any spatial effects sound, it basically makes, some people criticize wider for sounding artificial. I don't think it does. It does exactly what it needs to do. So if you need it for that specific task, that's up to you. But it can make these things sound more spacious by putting wider before any stereo effects. So that's the trick. I think a lot of people criticize it for either sounding artificial or sounding phasey. It's just because they don't know where to put it in the chain. Hey, Black Marvin, how you doing? Thank you, man. So what I'm just gonna carry on using the same technique and see how many acid sounds we can, or acid melodies we can create. Thank you, Wave Morpher. I'm glad you appreciate it. Have you ever tried quadraphonic or any other spatial stuff? To be honest, not really, because I don't really see the point in it. Obviously, I can see the point for, actually even less nowadays, you know, like I saw the point for 5.1 in cinematic, but now everything is streamed. And most people are just watching on a TV, which is either mono or stereo anyway. So I don't see the too much reason to invest in a system that's going to be quadraphonic or 5.1 or Atmos or anything like that. Also, myself as a sound designer, like most of the synths are just stereo anyway. And from there, you can kind of break it down on a molecular level and mix anything to whatever platform you need it for, you know, to deliver for. But at the end of the day, most people are just listening on stereo anyway, especially for music. So I haven't personally done any quadraphonic stuff. I'm one of the people that skipped on wider over time, but I might reconnect with it. So for me, the big thing was I couldn't use it for bass, and that's because of the fact that it stereoized the bass, and I didn't want that. But bass is actually the most useful thing for it, in my opinion, because you can take a mono signal, which is most of the time bass, and make it wide without it being stereo. That's the trick. It's wide, but it's not stereo. You know what I mean? There's no difference in the left or right. There's no issues with the transient or anything like that. I like that combination of notes. So let's try, okay, this time let's go with the notes first, and then we can figure out a good rhythm for the notes. So it was this one. Down, down. Okay, so once we've got the notes in, let's start developing a slightly more compelling Wavemore, for which more streams we start by creating a really compelling intro Atmos, so much so that you can't wait to hear the drop, then design the kick and bass around the Atmos vibe. I generally don't think it works very well that way. I like to do it the other way around, because to get a compelling drop to sound good, you need to plan what's going to come after. You know, to make a sort of build-up sound really good and the drop to sound perfect, you have to know what's going to drop. And so to create the intro first, to the point where it's compelling with the drop, it kind of won't work because you don't know what's coming. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like working the other way around, it's actually, maybe as a viewer, it doesn't sound as compelling as a track that's designed that way. But when you hear the finished track, it works better that way. Do you know what I mean? Jody Casio, how are you able to stream without headphones and the sound from the speakers does not leak into your mic? That's cool. I just I press pause when I talk, and then I switch the mic off. So I basically I've got a Stream Deck, Elgato Stream Deck, really cool thing, and that allows me to switch. I've got one, like a macro button that switches the mic off and the speakers on. So it kind of like has a couple of functions in it. So that allows me to do that kind of thing. But then I can also, if I do want to wear headphones, there's a switch that's like that I've set up like a headphones mode that will play the mic and the thing at the same time. Does that make sense? Fair enough, but I have seen some music streamers create amazing things linearly from intro, build up, drops on, and so on, like writing a story. I guess it could work, but often it's a procedure that they've kind of done, and they know what's coming. So like they know the type of beat that they're going to drop into, or they're using loops and samples. That's often what happens. So they know already the beat that they're going to drop into, so it's easy, or whatever the case is, so it's easier to do that. Okay, so we've got what notes we want to put in here. Now let's create slightly more compelling rhythm. So again, like I said, we can create pseudo Euclidean rhythms by creating say, for example, amount of gaps, like 3 gaps and then 2 gaps, and then repeat that kind of rhythmical gaps. So that's how you can create like pseudo Euclidean rhythms. So here we've got a gap of 3, then we've got a gap of 2. Now we're going to have another gap of 3 and then a gap of 2. And so this is essentially a Euclidean rhythm of 4/16 offset by 4. Or 3. So again, like the way to create these kind of pseudo Euclidean rhythms is to just choose an amount, like a number, and then choose another number, and then just duplicate that. So like 3, 2, 3, 2. So you're creating a kind of rhythm with gaps rather than with the notes themselves. I find that often creates more compelling rhythms when you focus more on the space and the kind of like these patterns of spaces in between the notes. It's weird, but it works. And it's like one of those things about Euclidean rhythms is as long as you kind of follow that pattern thing. So I'm going to just do these on the root note, and we can just make a bunch of variations. So here, let's go with 1 and then 3. 1, 3, and they're always going to work. Let's go with like 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And you can also do this on a kind of more macro level. So like have differing sequences on the notes. So like let's say for example layer this. So like this can be our high notes. I preferred the thing that we did earlier though. Was it 3-2? It was this one. Yeah, this was good. And then like here on the low notes, let's do a 2-1. But then what we can do is anytime it overlaps, we can just remove the lower note. That's also like a really powerful trick to create these sequences or melodies that sound like they're super advanced, but it's just you're choosing a number and slotting it in. You could just do it with the operator repeats as well, but the most powerful thing is to just kind of be able to intuitively do it. Do you know what I mean? So like learning what it is, using the repeats and stuff, but then learning how to do it yourself. That trains you to be able to just come up with these Groove Machine. No. Euclid was the original Groove Machine because Euclid created the maths that it all comes from. So here, let's put another layer in. What did we did 3-2, 2-1. Let's do 1-3. But let's start it offset by 1. So 1 and then 3. 1, 3, 1. And so any repeating notes, let's just remove. Or like where it's overlaid with another one. it's the concept of talent is a weird thing because there are obviously people who are like obviously talented, but I feel like it can only get you so far, and it's totally overshadowed by just working hard. So like I believe like you can be less talented than somebody and just put in more work and you're gonna get further. And there's that old saying, which I've suddenly it was on the tip of my tongue and now I've just suddenly forgot it. I'm gonna completely destroy it. It's something like talent, collective intelligence. How are you doing, bro? It's been a while. I hope you're well. Hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. That's it. I didn't destroy it. Okay, yeah, so another really cool thing is to just experiment with the lengths of your leads. So you can either just double or halve them, but you can also do tricky things like 1/3 them. So not all doors offer this, but if you hold Alt in Bitwig, you can actually shift something. You can stretch it and actually lock it on the grid rather than just half or 200%. You can do it like that. The problem now is some of these things will be off the grid. So then what I do is just jump in there and quantize it back onto the grid. So what we've done now is we've kind of just completely shifted things, quantized it back. So it's just a way of experimenting with the things that you have to make them more groovy or variations of the same thing. Cider. Oh gosh. That's fantastic. I think it kind of shits on what I just said, but it's such a good quote. Bach said, success is 99% hard work and 1% talent, but the 1% is the most important. Clearly he didn't know much about maths. Just kidding. Just kidding. Talent is just being able to do something without having to make yourself do it. I don't know about that. Because there's so many like really talented people who like just don't go far because they don't force themselves to do it. So I feel like it's a bit the other way around. Do you know what I mean? So like the ethics or like the imprinted ethics of being able to work hard will just force you to do it. So like people who are in the how can I say, in the habit of working hard are more likely to just do it without having to force themselves to do it. I think it's the people that are talented and know that they're talented that rely on that too, perhaps too much. And it's those ones that actually have to be a bit more disciplined and say like, okay, I know I'm talented, but now I actually need to work hard to put something out there and actually do something with the talent that I have. Do you know what I mean? But I guess it could be both ways. You know, I think to be talented, it takes a lot of hard work to get to that point. You know, if you think about like a virtuoso violinist, yes, they're talented, but it also takes like 10 years of music theory and playing the violin like an OG to actually get to the point where you're considered a virtuoso. Do you know what I mean? Joey DeCasio, how high in tempo can Psytrance get? It depends who you ask. Like, there's some oaks out there doing it at like 200 BPM. I'm not a big fan of that stuff. I mean, like, I don't hate. There's creativity in everything, I guess. But I find it so hard to dance to anything that's above 150. And please don't hate me, guys. It doesn't mean I don't appreciate high tech. I do. I love it. But just personally, it's like, I like the slower, groovier stuff. I feel like rhythms can hit better at slightly slower tempos because you kind of hear these little intricacies in between the grooves, where when it's too fast, it's kind of just like, and it kind of becomes a macro rhythm thing. Do you know what I mean? The problem also when it's so fast, the speed at which your bass note can play is so short that you barely even get one full saw wave. Does that make sense? So like you can't even hear the tone because you don't get one cycle. That's how fast some of the shit gets, you know? Boomer, dude! Like even now, like with a groovier bass, it doesn't quite hit. Like, 'cause I feel like it's a bit fast for this style of bass. Whereas like around like 136 or so is probably gonna let this like groove sit a bit better. It feels a bit less frantic. What we can even do is create like another variation of this, which is like not an acid lead, but then use some of these variations which we've made so that we have these kind of like, you know, two versions of like a lead that kind of works, but like playing off each other, you know? Choir pad is so freaking nice. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's actually, I'm working on a pack for Faceplant. It's part of that. I don't want to give away too much though. Or maybe we can just do the other type of acid lead, the saw. You're talking about rev intensity. Absolutely. Arturia is so good at interface design. I wish they would do more of the unique stuff, because when they do, they knock it out the park. Absolutely. I'm not hating on their remake stuff, because that's fantastic. But when they do something that's their own designs, they're always phenomenal. I wish they would do more of them. I mean, Pigments, look at that. Great example. I mean, I don't use it as much as I should, because personally, my preference is just with FacePlant. You can do more with it, but it's still a great synth. Pigments is fantastic. I just realized I'm probably going to call it in about 10 minutes or so. Yes, I got a power outage coming a little bit later, and I've still got quite a few things that I want to do before then. So, yeah, if you have questions or anything, if you want me to go over, let's go over the process that I used to create these acid lead once more, for those who are perhaps just tuning in for the first time now. So the idea is to create a compelling. Okay, so what we want to do is we kind of want to split the different layers of our acid lead into, let's say, different voices, so to speak. So we want to program them in like individually. So the first thing would be to like figure out a good accent pattern. So these are the kind of notes that stick out in a melody. For example, if we listen to like most acid leads in Psytrance, a lot of them go like da 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 da. It's those third notes are the ones that kind of like stick out. It's like, oh, okay, we remember those notes. So it's like try figure out a good pattern for those notes, and then just add anything root notes, any root notes or other variations as fillers, and then it should work. So it helps to obviously know what scales. Bitwig 5 looks fantastic. I haven't installed it yet, but I'm very much looking forward to it. Lots of really, really cool features there. So the first thing we want to do is try to figure out like the a compelling rhythm or notes to use for our accents. I like to do them either one or the other. It's kind of often hard to do it both at the same time, to just come up with something good on the spot. Sometimes you can just intuitively come up with something on the spot, like the first thing just happened, you know. But sometimes it helps to either start with a rhythm or start with which notes you want to use. So in this context, let's start with a rhythm first, because I'm kind of like, I'm feeling like I don't know what notes to use. I'm a little bit, let's say, I'm starting to get to that creative block stage of music production now. Like I want to work more on the technical things than the creative things. So let's try work out. I guess the shorter notes is just so that they don't overlap in the sequencer. Do you know what I mean? But it's very much to do with like the different envelopes that you use, you know. You could either program shorter notes or just have shorter envelopes. Heretic. So let's first come up with a good rhythm, and then we can shift that rhythm onto notes that we think work. So a trick to get rhythms that work almost every time is to use a system called Euclidean rhythms. And the quickest, easiest way to fake a Euclidean rhythm is to just use repetitions or a pattern of gaps in between the notes. So for example, you pick two numbers, like low numbers, like either 2, 1, 3, 4, etc. So let's just say, let's pick 2, 1. That's going to be the gaps in between the notes, and then we repeat that 2, 1. So what do I mean by that? Put in a note, have a gap of 2 steps, and then another note, and then a gap of 1 step, and then we have this. And now because we're going to duplicate this, what we can do is we can just select this and duplicate it like this. And so now we've created a 2-to-1 Euclidean rhythm. Let me just play this in the project and then just loop just this part. It's like a trick to make rhythms that kind of almost always work is to use Euclidean rhythms. And then another trick to quickly create Euclidean rhythms is to just pick 2 numbers, put the gaps in, and they kind of work almost every time. And so another trick would be to like offset these in time. So like either start it late or start it early, or whatever the case is, so that you get this slight offset rhythm. So here, if we put in the kick and bass, for example, you'll hear those differences a little bit better, I think. Put this in here. See, that one is very on the rhythm, but then slightly off actually sounds pretty good. Okay, so now what I want to do is I just want to shift these onto other notes that are in the scale. And because I'm obviously not feeling too creative, I'm just going to go linearly, like downwards. Like let's start at the top note in the scale and just go work our way down. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, I don't like that too much, so let's just shift some notes around a bit, maybe get a little bit more creative with it, see what works. Okay, that works better. And then the rest is to just kind of fill in the gaps with other notes that are either on the root note or not. But I generally just stick with the root note. If you've got these parts where it's like 2, I usually go like down, up, and then up, down, just to create more variations in the overall rhythm. Does that make sense? And then here you see we've got this note that's the same as this. Maybe we can go up and slide down. Be honest, Marcus, it's that question. It's like dependent on the club. So like, I'd say most club systems are probably shite. I mean, like I've played on one club sound system in my life that actually sounded good with Psytrance, but it just because the club had a Function One system that was like fully tuned up, and so obviously that's going to sound good. Do you know what I mean? Most club systems will run in mono so that they have less phasing, because they'll have like speakers, one at the bar facing this way and one at and the other place facing this way, and totally terrible like acoustic design, because most bars or clubs they're not really focused on the sound quality. They're just focused on getting people in, getting people drunk, and then getting them home again. Do you know what I mean? It's like the sound is like a extra thing on top, whereas obviously some clubs will take it seriously, you know. And in those cases, Psytrance will obviously sound good because it's like a tune system. But I think it's more down to like what club, you know. Obviously, more minimal stuff will sound better on worse systems, but also because often how can I say? I think it's something to do with the fact that like some genres, the fans just appreciate quality of sound better, so you're more likely to hear that genre on a better sound system. So the people who make that music don't cut corners in terms of the mastering. So like a lot of the time you'll hear, if you watch like mixing and mastering tutorials, you'll hear people say like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm saturating the low mids so that you can hear it better on a laptop speaker. And it's like, what? Sorry. You're compromising your mix so that somebody who's listening to the thing on a laptop speaker has a better experience. It doesn't sound like that's like, do you know what I mean? It's like cutting corners so that in people who are listening in terrible spaces, does that make sense? Can hear it better, which I think is there's different kind of schools of thought when it comes to producing music and listening to music and that kind of thing. And I think just like some genres that people just appreciate quality a bit better. It's another thing like the whole mono check thing. The reason people check in mono is because of this exact situation. I think the mono check is because you're kind of so let's say for example you got your mix sounding perfect in stereo, then you do the mono check and it doesn't. What do? Do you now compromise your perfect sounding stereo mix so that somebody who's listening on a mono system can have a better experience? Meanwhile, probably 90% of your audience is going to be listening to it in stereo. Do you know what I mean? Nowadays, especially with headphones and stuff, everybody's listening in stereo, you know? So like, I personally wouldn't, like, yes, check the mix, but if there's anything wrong, I wouldn't compromise it based on whether it could sound good on a system that's compromised. You know what I mean? Okay, I think I've got to call it. Wavemorph. I think many people like to be able to talk on top of the music in a social club, and with Psytrance, it's less easy for people to play the normal social game on top. Well, I don't know. Like, I mean, if you go to festivals, like, you see more people playing the social game than people on the dance floor. There's more people like sitting around the edges, like chatting and stuff, than like on the actual dance floor. So I don't know about that, but maybe it's in the club. maybe just Psytrance doesn't fit the club environment as much. I don't know. Anyway, I've got to call it. I will see you guys soon. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. We are pushing for that 50K this week, hopefully. Sometime in the next few days. I actually haven't checked yet. Maybe we just suddenly got there. Who knows? But we are pushing for that 50K, folks. So if you have access to your granny or your parents' account on YouTube, just go subscribe to me, please, on their account. Just kidding. Just kidding. That's hacking the system. I wouldn't recommend that. Anyway, see you, folks. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm going to loop whatever we have here, this little piece that we have. Loop it for a few minutes for those who do want to listen and just get a bit of inspo. See you guys next time. Cheers.